It wasn't the result we wanted. It wasn't the weekend we needed, but it was an improved performance. And the bigger picture perhaps reveals more than we might realise in the immediate aftermath. This is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m. at UK time. Thank you as always for joining me and making this a part of your morning routines. It is incredibly appreciated. I hope you're doing good. I hope you're doing well. Thank you as always for joining me, and thank you for making this a part as always of those morning routines. Good morning to those in the chat box. Thank you for joining us live. Paul Jr., Arasilki, Blackshine, Martin, Christopher, Damien, Wayne, Olawale, Blackshine, Stevie, Matt G, Amira, Jiti, Carl, Knowledge and Kim. We've got Trader Mike. We've got Gruntley Poos. We've got Naz and Loga and Mark and Andy and plenty more of you guys and girls too. Thank you also always for tuning in. Incredibly appreciated. And thank you to you all for hopefully dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. If you are indeed new around here, with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. I sadly have to bring you the bad news that the international break is here. And it's never a nice time, of course, to sit here and talk to you during the international break. It's never a nice time to have to, look through scantily clad news, shall we put it in that way, because it is pretty bare at times when going through the international break. So I hope that you will continue to join me. And of course, we'll bring you updates that do occur. I imagine that there'll be some stuff going on behind the scenes about Edu's situation, about the latest injury situations. International football, of course, brings up kind of the opportunity to see how some of maybe the fringe players are getting on, but also hopefully avoiding injury themselves. So yes, there's hopefully plenty of good news to come, but I understand the international break is a pretty dull time for plenty of people. So bear with us and stick with us during the next 2 weeks. Right, let's jump into today's stories, shall we? All the reaction from yesterday's game. What was a much better performance, but still, we sadly cannot end this run. We can't end this period of failing to win games. I really do think that this run that we started with the game at Bournemouth, we failed to win a single Premier League game during this period of Premier League matches prior to this international break and after the last international break. And that's a really damaging period. Now, Arsenal, of course, suffered a very similar period last December, where they went into the month losing to Aston Villa. They would then draw with Liverpool. They would then lose to West Ham, and they would then lose to Fulham. So actually, it was a worse period than we've experienced this October-November period as well. And the hope's got to be, of course, that things will change in the next period of the season after the next international break, where the fixtures open up a lot more for the Gunners than they have done in recent weeks. But there is frustrations and there is still problems that we need to overcome. But there's also a reality as well with the points that I'll talk about probably at the start of part 2 to give you a better understanding of where Arsenal sit compared to last year. Now, Arsenal went with probably the strongest team that they could have gone with. I personally picked Jesus over Martinelli in my starting lineup just because I thought Martinelli needed a rest, but we'll get onto Martinelli's performance shortly. We decided to go with Rice. We started Odegaard, who played the full game, and I'm intrigued to see what that means for his participation for Norway during this international break. But Rice starting, of course, came off in the second half. Mikel Arteta speaking at full time in the game, after the game, and basically ruled out Saka and Rice of the international break as well. He says it doesn't look good because two players of that importance tell you they cannot continue in the game. So obviously it isn't good news. He says two players have just come off. I don't expect them to be fit because if they were, they wouldn't have come off. So, I mean, there's positives and negatives. Hopefully Saka and Rice won't be now going to international duty with England, and they can stay behind and work on their fitness and work on getting back to full freshness, freshness with the club as well. So that's, I think, certainly an important thing as well. Martinelli missed a huge opportunity, of course, in the opening stages of the game. A really good chance to give Arsenal the leads. Havertz, of course, also missing the opportunity to give Arsenal the lead because he was standing inches offside. I mean, inches are definitely the undercurrent of this game. The fine margins, again, not falling in Arsenal's favour. But after Martinelli missed that big chance and Havertz had his goal ruled out, he did return with a fantastic finish and an even tougher chance, I think, the one that he misses. And it's no surprise, of course, that that pass for Martinelli's goal came from Martin Odegaard. But just a word on Martinelli. We created, and I think, this was the difference between this game and others. We didn't have a chance like the two that Martinelli had in any of the previous games. We didn't have a chance, like we'll talk about at the end of the game, like we had in any of the previous games. We didn't have a chance to get the ball in the back of net like Havertz did in any of the previous games. And that shows you the difference between the previous performances and this one. This was a performance that was more akin to the Arsenal side of old that we've been seeing, a performance that created opportunities for us to win in much more of a clear-cut way than just pinging crosses into the box. In fact, the opportunities that we did create, I don't think came from crosses, besides, of course, Odegaard's kind of switch of play. The ball to the back post where Martinelli eventually scored, it's less of a cross. It's more of a switch of play into his feet to then obviously take the ball down and score from a tight angle. Excellent pass, by the way, from Odegaard. And, it was indeed Odegaard that provided so much more creativity. The ability for Arsenal to create yet another gap. I suppose the gap is the big thing for me. The gap between Odegaard and everybody else. The gap between everybody else and Odegaard is so significant. How silly must anybody feel to have questioned the idea that he is holding us back, that there is restraint when Odegaard plays, and that there's somehow a level to reach without him in the squad? Because my goodness me, we've missed this man. We've missed this player. And he's been out for an incredibly long time. He plays 5 minutes against Inter and then plays like his life depends on it for the entire fixture against Chelsea. And by the way, we'll come on to the opportunity at the end, but Odegaard has a part to play in that as well. But Arsenal could not keep hold of their leads, and they gave Neto so much space to attack and to eventually strike a fantastic shot into the bottom right-hand corner. It was a great goal by Neto, but the defending for this is very unlike Arsenal, even in these recent weeks. It's unlike Arsenal to see them give the opposition so much space in kind of this stage of the field. I don't know why Partey is standing where Partey is standing. He's the defensive midfielder. He should be pushing up into that space, and for some reason, he isn't. I don't know if it's because somebody else is out of position, so he's covering. But I don't really know why Partey is standing where Partey is standing, and really did. It was a frustrating kind of gap that was left open for Neto, to just kind of waltz into. It's his first Premier League goal of the season, believe it or not. But it seemed that there was a disjointment about the back line for this particular chance, and Arsenal paid the price. But it was right at the end of the game that Arsenal could have won it. And the rhetoric around the club and around the feeling for this would have been entirely different. If this ball goes in the back of the net and Arsenal win the game with the final kick and they can kick on with 3 points in the bag, my goodness me, how different the landscape is. And I feel as though the best way to talk about these games is in the case of fine margins. And that should bring some encouragement, because it has been fine margins that have ultimately cost Arsenal. The difference between a referee making a red card decision at Bournemouth, crazy decisions against Liverpool that have cost Arsenal as well. And then going, of course, to that Newcastle game, the fine margin was only the fact that our performance was dreadful. There was no fine margins at all in that Newcastle game. We were just awful. But there was only one goal that separated, of course, the two sides on the day. But this performance was far, far better, and we were just inches away in this case. And it's no surprise, of course, that it was Odegaard that played the ball to a onside William Saliba. The graphics that have come out after the game, this line actually that you can see on your screen here is the line of Saliba, and if you actually look a little bit closer, you can see Marc Cucurella's trailing leg is further back than that. There's been further analysis into this movement that shows that Saliba was indeed onside in this moment as well. So it's gutting. It's gutting that Saliba in this moment was creating a fantastic opportunity in this moment for his teammates to score, and Trossard takes it off the boot of Kai Havertz to just tap in this moment as well. Incredibly annoying, incredibly frustrating, but that's football at the end of the day, and that's the reason. But great movement, by the way, from Saliba. Fantastic pass from Odegaard, timed it to perfection to keep Saliba on side. It's Trossard, who missed a brilliant chance early in the game, who was offside. It turned out, the one that he skies over the bar. But as soon as he kind of skied over the bar, I felt as though that that kind of was like, that was the game there. Even though he was offside in the moment that he skied it over the bar, I felt like that was the moment for me that was that was ultimately drawing the line, if you will, between this and a potential win. But where does that leave Arsenal? Well, of course, it leaves Arsenal sitting in fourth place right now, 9 points off of the leads, level on points with three other sides in Chelsea, Nottingham Forest and Brighton, all on 19 points. But it leaves Arsenal in a position where now Arsenal have an opportunity. Now, I was doing some research into the numbers from last season, and Arsenal will drop, or would have dropped, 11 points in the period that is coming up, the period that Arsenal are about to go into next season. Now, so far during this campaign, Arsenal have dropped plenty. They've dropped 14 points over the course of the first 9 games, which is frankly mad. Sorry, not 14 points. They've dropped 10 points over the first 11 games of the season. And Arsenal will be in a position where if they manage to avoid dropping 6 more points between now and the end of the year, which of course includes games at home to Nottingham Forest, at home to Manchester United, away to West Ham, away to Fulham, at home to Everton, away to Palace. At home to Palace. No, it is away to Palace. I'm thinking about the League Cup game. Away to Palace and at home to Ipswich, and even that away game at Brentford. A period of games where Arsenal are no longer leaving London, besides for their Champions League trip to Sporting. If Arsenal only drop 5, it means that they would have dropped less points than at the same stage last season, believe it or not. That's how damaging. I think that provides you an insight into how damaging the December period last year was. It's the loss to Aston Villa, the draw at Anfield, the loss to West Ham, and the loss to Fulham meant that Arsenal dropped, such a significant 10 points were dropped during that period. And if Arsenal managed to drop fewer than just 6, they'll still be in a better position this time around than they were last season. And all of those games you would look at and say, in the same way that we've been looking at these previous fixtures with real challenges, 4 away games in a row, Arsenal return to the Emirates for the first time since that Liverpool fixture, believe it or not. But if you look at the games, Forest at home, you'd expect to win. West Ham away, you would expect to win. Man United at home, even against Amorim, you would expect to win. Fulham away, yeah, we lost that game last season, but on paper, you're expecting Arsenal to win that one. Everton at home, you're expecting to win. Palace away, you're expecting to win. Ipswich at home, you're expecting to win. And if Arsenal can avoid dropping 6 or more points, they will be in a better position this season compared to last season. And yet, the feeling is different. And that's probably because of Liverpool's significant gap over Arsenal right now. Hopefully, Arsenal can indeed find themselves after this international break in a much better place in terms of their team, in terms of availability, and in terms of form. But as soon as we drop points again, it is going to, create a very, very disappointing period and a disappointing feeling. It's also worth pointing out that there was a campaign, I think it was 2 years ago, where Liverpool had a 10-point lead over Arsenal and Manchester City halfway through the campaign and still managed to finish behind the Gunners, even with Jurgen Klopp in charge. So I always say to those people that say the season is over, if you're not willing to kind of take a step back and look at the bigger picture, cancel your subscriptions, come off social media, and just go into hibernation until next season, because the energy is not needed. It's not needed in any way, shape, or form. So that's my recommendation for those that think the season's done. Not only are Arsenal, of course, still in a Champions League system, they're in a quarterfinals of a cup competition where they're expected to progress to the semi-finals if they beat Crystal Palace at home, and they've still got the FA Cup to come. There's so much more still to play for. So if indeed you do think the season's done and in your view the season's over, take your own advice and hop out of here, because we don't need that type of energy. Well, let's go to part 2 in your questions then, right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show where we jump into the chat box and tackle some of your questions. There was another graphic that shows Saliba being onside again, because I see some of you in the chat box are saying that he definitely was off when he definitely wasn't. Let me see if I can find it for you, because there is another graphic that shows Saliba in a lot more detail being onside as well. I think was drawn by a different media outlet, but I'll see if I can find it for you while I'm talking. But we'll tackle some of your questions at this period. If you could be ever so kind to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new around here with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show, that would be incredibly appreciated as well. This is always a very tricky part of the season, the international break, especially when this period has been particularly poor for Arsenal. Yeah, very annoying. But if you could stick with us over this international break, it would be massively appreciated indeed. I can't seem to find the graphic right now. Where is it? I was actually looking at it this morning, and it had like all the different types of lines where you have the hangover and the gap. But yeah, I'll try and find it a little bit later on, I guess, once we've taken some more of these questions. Omar says, ifs and buts we have become. Let's get it done. Omar, of course, sending me a tweet yesterday prior to Martinelli's goal saying, are you still glad, Tom, that you started Martinelli up top? Ironically, I didn't. I started Jesus up top of my team. And then Martinelli went and scored, Omar. So I did DM you back, but weirdly, I didn't get a reply. Cardi says, do you think we need to shift focus from winning the title to just winning something? The team looks slow, lethargic, and at the moment we are very boring to watch. I didn't find yesterday's game boring at all. I thought it was an end-to-end game. I thought we created big chances. I thought, at the end, we could have even won it, was it not for the Trossard taking the ball off of Havertz's foot. But when it comes to, the shifting focus, there is no shift focus at all. Because Arsenal will be going into every single game trying to win it. We'll be going into that Crystal Palace game, without question, the intention of reaching a cup semi-final. And hoping to go on and win that competition as well. Amira says, I understand fans slating individuals, but to be honest, the entire team has been off. The attackers not showing conviction, midfielders having ups and down performances, defenders not looking as confident. It's also worth pointing out that Arteta did speak after the game and described that other players apparently have been suffering with some problems and playing through injury. Seems that there are some things going on behind the scenes that we are unaware of right now, that are also players playing through pain, playing through fitness problems. And, I think that perhaps provides some further context to where we find ourselves now. Dan says, Tom, did you see the comments from Mike Dean during commentary about Colwell delaying the game? Can't claim it was the result, but comedic value is unmatched. I think that was obviously when Raya booted the ball through and he tried to... I think he should be booked there. I think any player should be booked for trying to delay a restart. Colwell was then booked later on in the game. I will point out Odegaard's very lucky not to be sent off. Odegaard probably should have been sent off, because I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that he was booked. Let me just double check this, because I'm pretty sure Odegaard was booked. I might be wrong, actually. But there was a moment where someone... Was it Jackson ran through... Let me double check if Odegaard got a booking, because I may be wrong here, but I have a feeling that he got booked. Oh, he didn't. Okay, I'll take it back. So Odegaard was very lucky to avoid a yellow card at the end of the game when he takes out Cucurella when he's on the counter. I thought for some reason he was already booked, because there was that moment where he took out, I think it was Jackson or Caicedo, when he was kind of through. Probably should have been booked then. So Odegaard cynically stopped 2 attacks during the game, and you could argue that both of those were yellows that he somehow escaped. But Colwill, yes, definitely, I think should be booked for stopping David Raya's kick, and then Colwill is, of course, stopped later on in the game. Tizer says, we've played 5 of last year's top 6 away from home in the opening 11 games, and we now have a chance to push on. I do believe Arteta is not trusting the bench again with Sterling and Waneri. I mean, Sterling wasn't in the team yesterday, Tizer, it's worth pointing out. Of course, he was out of the situation. And Nathan says titles aren't won in November. And it's a really good point. And not only that, but I feel a lot of people that called Arsenal bottlers last season are very much the same people that weren't giving Arsenal the energy that they're giving to Liverpool right now. At the same stage this season, very quick to jump on the bandwagon to describe Arsenal as bottlers, but not willing to, but turning around now and saying the season's done. Despite the fact that we know that teams at the top of the table can slip. So that, I think, is quite an ironic point to bring up. Mickey says, Tom, do you think that with Liverpool it will be a case of overboiling, like a pot that boils fastest falls quickest, or something like that? We don't know. Liverpool have been able to build up a brilliant amount of momentum. They've had a fantastic gift of fixtures at the beginning of the campaign that have allowed them to build up a very good period of form, and that's taken them into a tougher period of games, which they've then started to come through also very well. They play Manchester City soon. We want a draw in that game. We don't want either side getting the points in that fixture, but they've got some other tough games too. But Arsenal have already played some really tough games away from home. Liverpool still have to go to... they still have to play Man City twice. They still have to go to Aston Villa. They've got some tough away games still to come as well. And Mikey says, how lucky were they? Aston Villa were robbed. And that's the other thing, is that decisions have gone other teams' way that haven't our way. I had some, salty Liverpool fans in our comment section yesterday moaning about our discussion about how Aston Villa were robbed of 2 big decisions. And they were robbed of 2 big decisions. I think Ollie Watkins is fouled in the box. And I think that Pau Torres has his shirt pulled in the box as well from a free kick, and that's also a foul. So Aston Villa could have got 2 penalties on Saturday, and they weren't given. So I think there is some fortune. I mean, if we talk about fortune in general, Arsenal have had their least fortuitous season that we have ever had during an Arteta campaign. The injuries, the red cards, the strange decision-making, other teams getting the benefit of the doubt over us. Like, we have had such bad luck this season. It's been ridiculous. But there has also been things that you have to point to and say, we could have done more. The management of Waneri definitely being one of them. The way in which that we have not responded to different results. The performance at Newcastle was unforgivable. The performance at Bournemouth was not good enough. And that falls on the players and also, and more importantly, the manager. And he needs to be able to galvanise his squad. He needs to better be able to adapt to the loss of a player like Odegaard. And we are lacking a forward figure. We are lacking an attacking player. And if we don't sign anybody in January, that will be an unforgivable window. To not sign an attacking player in this January window forthcoming, especially if we manage to kind of kickstart our season from this point forward and get back into the swing of things of winning games over the next 6 weeks, I think would be a huge, huge misstep by the club. So hopefully that's not the case. Wilson says, I believe that you should do a poll that mentions our Arsenal title hopes over. And secondly, I believe that you should do a call on fans allowing us to have our say about Arsenal performance against Chelsea, our previous games and our title hopes. Wilson, I'd love to do a phone show. It's not going to be one today, I'm afraid. I'm very busy. But over the international break, there is always time to do a phone-in show. So I'm sure that we will have one at some stage. Amberley says, yeah, I agree with that. We desperately need someone to add a bit of firepower in the attack, and Trossard is looking woeful. Martinelli is a bit hit and miss in front of goal as well. Vacan says, why did we send Fabio Vieira on loan if we didn't have a plan to use Waneri a lot and didn't have an adequate backup? A, because he wanted to go. B, because 90%, 99% maybe even of Arsenal fans have continuously said that Fabio Vieira has not been good enough. So the Fabio Vieira one never makes any sense to me. The Fabio Vieira loan move being criticised never makes any sense to me, because all the people that are criticising the decision to loan Fabio Vieira are all the people that have said that he's one of the worst signings that we've ever made. So I don't really get the idea around moaning about that, because Nwaneri, that's where the focus is. Don't moan about the decision to loan out Vieira. Point the finger at the decision not to give Nwaneri more opportunities to play. Omar says, Tom, I really want to know what you think about Martinelli being and how he can be a better player. Sometimes you just see the ceiling. I have liked him in the past, but right now he hasn't gone up, and chances have been missed. I mean, he had 2 chances yesterday. He took one of them. Absolutely, he should take the first one, and he should do better with the first one. But the second one is harder, and he takes it. And hopefully, again, we say, like, weights being lifted. Hopefully, this can be a point that he can then kick on from, a point that he can find himself doing better from. That's what we want to see. A1 says, what profile should we be targeting? Absolutely a versatile attacker, particularly one that's maybe, that can play, not even maybe, definitely can play on both flanks. That is absolutely someone, but also perhaps someone who can also play through the middle. A kind of an attacking playmaker, maybe, that can play in those central roles, but also play in wide areas. Basically, we need a much better Emile Smith-Rowe is what we need in some ways. But maybe someone who's got more traits towards a winger, and certainly much more pace and energy than Smith-Rowe does, I think, is where that is. And if people are going to turn around again and say, well, why did we let Smith-Rowe go? Because, again, he asked to leave. And Arsenal, if they were going to reinvest, needed to bring in money. And we got a very good fee for him, as we did with Nketiah, as we did with Ramsdale. Ian says, Arsenal feels like need a controlled 2-0 win in the next match for us to be able to go on a winning streak. Confidence is so key for these athletes. Statistical measurement of that is quite tricky. And I think, we've got the capacity to do that. We know that. Modric says, I will buy a defender again. Mark my words. He may buy a defender. We do need another defender, it's worth pointing out, because Zinchenko and Kivior and Tierney and Tomiyasu are all destined, I think, for the exit. So there is going to be need to bring in defenders, believe it or not. But the priority has to be a forward player. Has to be a forward player. Magama says Smith-Rowe would have been a better backup than Vieira. I agree with that. Smith-Rowe would have been a better backup than Vieira, but Smith-Rowe pushed to leave the club, wanted to leave the club, wanted a new challenge, and wanted to move to Fulham. So it did happen. Arsenal, of course, I think, should have better used Nwaneri in his absence. Ian says, why do you think so many of our attacking players have lost form at the same time? Trossard, Jesus, Martinelli, not so much Saka, but he has become hesitant on the ball. 2 words, Martin Odegaard. It's as simple as that. We were better attacking yesterday. We created more big chances in yesterday's game from non-crossing positions than in any game, I think any of the games in the last 4 matches combined. We created so many more bigger opportunities by playing the ball on the floor. That goal that we should have scored at the end, the chance that we should have scored at the end, was one of the best movements and passing combinations that I've seen this Arsenal team produce in a couple of months. It's been months since I've seen us put passes together and create an opportunity like we did at the end of yesterday's game. It's been so long. And who was the guy playing the pass to Saliba? Martin Odegaard. And no, Dermot, it was not offside. It was not offside. And you can, again, I need to try and find this image so I can show you what it was and how it was indeed onside. I will find it. I'm determined to find it. I don't know if I need to go on my phone because I feel like I had it on here. Saliba onside. But the fact of the matter is that moment, that period of the game where ultimately Arsenal found themselves, in the ascendancy at the end, going for the game, that chance that we created is just a perfect example of how we have played in the past and we know what we're ultimately capable of. So, yeah, very, very frustrating indeed. I can't seem to find it at the moment, which is really irritating because it was a really... It's so clear when you see it with the benefit of the lines, how onside it was. But sadly, I'm not finding the image right now. I'm going to keep scrolling. I'm going to keep tackling your questions, and I'll keep trying to find it as well. Back in his says, morning, Tom. I'm so late. So I'm going to wind back. Thank you for tuning in, mate. Really appreciate that your time. Joe says that would have been a glorious Havertz scoring last kick of the game. That would have really springboarded our season. Absolutely. Mike says Odegaard's body fat percentage looks so low. It's even that he wanted to be a beast this season. Let's pray he stays injury free from this moment forwards. Flashlight says, what are Liverpool's shortcomings in your opinion? I mean, the midfield is obviously a question mark. You know, they lack a defensive midfielder. They may go in for one in January. We'll have to wait and see. They wanted Martin Zubimendi. We know that. So defensively, there are openings in Liverpool's team. It's just teams need to start taking them, and referees need to start making the correct decisions. Ian says, Tomiyasu just fills me with so much disappointment. He would have been so key in this block of games. Also, he passes with his left foot quite a lot to bring symmetry while playing left backs. Absolutely spot on. John says, is Kudus' release clause available in January? And do you think that we can get Semenyo in January? I think they would both add great depth to the wings and are both in the right age bracket. I don't know about the release clause. I think it's the summer that activates. I don't think it's available in January. Semenyo, it's a decent opportunity, although I would say that I think there is a lot of emphasis on it being this season rather than it being on the other seasons. But yeah, that is the reality that we find ourselves in right now. Is that we need to find that reinforcement. We absolutely desperately need to find it. I found the image. Okay, right. I found the picture. Now I can get it up on the screen for you. And it shows you in detail the lines. Share my screen. Here you go. So as you can see from the image, you've got the blue line there, which is the back of Cucurella's foot at the point that the ball is being played. You can see that Saliba's arm, which is not the point of offside, it's worth pointing out. But even if it was the point of offside, his arm is behind this thin blue line that you can see here. The red line shows where Saliba's offside positioning is, although I think it would be slightly further ahead, although it is actually taking into account, you see this little yellow L here? It takes into account that kind of the perception of where his arm is at the point that it would be offsides, the point at the edge of the kind of the sleeve line, if you would call it. So if you draw that line straight down from his sleeve, you get that he is very clearly onside during this moment. And yes, Omar, it is salt in the wounds that this moment was indeed onside. And it is very frustrating because it should have been the moment that Arsenal, again, got those 3 points at the end of the game and scored. But it's incredibly annoying. Incredible. Fuad says, are we sure this is the same camera angle that the PGMOL use? Yes, we are. Jahio says, was Partey, Havertz, Rice and Martinelli at fault for the goal? There was a lot of players at fault for the goal. There's always players to point the finger at. Partey, I think, positioning, I don't know why he's where he is. And Josh says, yep, I fully agree. Tuttle race is all but gone. Very disappointed we focused on so much attack and the defenders that we've got, how thin our attack is. It's been poor this season. I mean, all but gone, I don't think is wildly unfair. Saying it is gone would be unfair, but saying it's all but gone, I'm not going to disagree with people putting that in and saying that it's all but gone. And, it's very difficult to see Arsenal getting back into it, but let's see how these next few weeks take us. If indeed we manage to go on an incredible run between now and the end of the year, we will be in a better position than we will be, or rather was, at the same point last season. So believe it or not, Arsenal can still be comparatively better than they were last season if indeed they do manage to go on an incredible run between now and the end of the year. And that's not the end of the season, that's just the end of the year. So let's wait and see what happens in these next 6 games. Dara says, it feels like Trossard is playing against us over the past couple of games. He has not been good, it's fair to say. Ajmal says, it's been 3 seasons in a row where we have 3 or 4 games on a winless streak. Do you think that we could improve last season's 89 points? We need at least 23 wins and 2 draws out of 27 games. Yeah, it's very difficult to see that. But we do know that Arsenal have the capacity to be able to go on the run, don't we? We know that Arsenal have it in them. We know Arsenal can do it. And we've also brought in some extra players, of course, this season with Calafiori hopefully being back. I think Calafiori's absence has definitely been felt. Losing him before the Liverpool game was an absolute disaster. Calafiori being out before the Liverpool game and then having an injury which cost him this period has been huge. And we just can't catch a break. And I think, injuries are telling. And you see that in Man City's team. You look at the players they've lost. Rodri being out. They are 4 games having been lost in a row. That's never happened in Pep Guardiola's reign at Manchester City. They've not lost 4 games in a row. They've lost Rodri and they have lost 4 games in a row. And people talk about the fact that Arsenal haven't done enough in the market. City haven't done enough in the market. I'd argue that Liverpool haven't either. The summer was not a period that offered the teams the best opportunities to strengthen their squads. City sold Julian Alvarez, didn't replace him. If Haaland goes down, where are City's goals going to come from? Savinho, I think, is yet to score in the Premier League. I think I'm right in saying. Rodri's replacement, they loaned out Calvin Phillips. I don't blame them. He's not very good. But, they just don't have another defensive midfielder at the moment. And you imagine that in January, City will go into the market and find one. Maybe Zubimendi, maybe that's who they look to. But it is just incredibly frustrating that it seems that all of these things have conspired and it's built up against us. And but again, it's not just about you can make all these reasons and they are reasons, but ultimately there is also things that you need to point to that we haven't done ourselves. We haven't been good enough. We've not been responsive in bigger games like Newcastle and Bournemouth. Arteta's not making enough proactive choices with the 11, with some of his substitutes as well. So it's all a bit of both. John says, if you look at the Villa, City, Arsenal squads, more of their players played in Euros and the Copa America. Do you believe the amount of games and the quality of the games in the new Champions League is having an effect? Maybe, especially with, of course, the injuries that are being suffered as well. But yeah, it's incredibly frustrating to see, where things are right now. Aston Villa in the table are currently 9th, but that is only because they're 1 point off 4th placed Arsenal. This league is incredibly competitive this season. There's 1 point separating 3rd place and 9th place. There are 4 teams currently on 19 points. There are 3 teams on 18 points. It's incredibly tight this season, especially in the context of a top 4 race, if Arsenal ever have to enter that, and I sincerely hope that they don't. But I genuinely believe that Arsenal are where they are because, of course, the run of games that we've had, because the fixtures we've had, and because of the injuries that we've had. That is why we are where we are, with a contribution, of course, from some of the decisions that we've made. I think that if we can indeed spin this after the international break and find our feet again and go on that run again, I think that's going to be big. I think that's going to be huge. And I think it will start to bring into perspective the season as a whole. And that's why for those that have given up, I can't bring you back. There's nothing I can say that if you think the season's done and over, that will bring you back. If you honestly believe it's over and done at this point, I can't bring you back. Nothing I can say. And I'm not aiming to. I'm not wanting to be honest, either. I think that if you think the season's done, I think you should take your own advice and go. Hibernate until next season. Come back with your energy then, because it's not what we need. Carl says, can we cheer up and talk about Spurs? It's just so irrelevant to me, like Tottenham right now. It's always great laughing at Tottenham. And if they'd have beaten Ipswich, they would have been above Arsenal right now, of course. They would be sitting on 19 points, but with a superior goal difference. But they lost at home to Ipswich. So, Omar says we were top last season for the most point, and we still didn't win it. And that's football. That's just what football is. Joe says Liverpool are a Salah or Virgil van Dijk injury away from collapsing. It's all well and good saying they're this and this away from collapsing. I don't want to have to rely on other injuries for other teams. I want to rely on us being good. I want to rely on us doing well. I want to rely on us creating the chances. And there's been mitigating circumstances that have stopped us from doing that, of course. But still, I just don't want to look at the other teams. We need to think about ourselves. We just need to focus on ourselves. That's just the reality of the situation. And by the way, in yesterday's game, just get annoyed at referees again. Martinelli was blown offside twice when he wasn't. And Fofana should have given us a corner and didn't. Like Fofana, there's a point where the ball hits Fofana and it goes out for a corner, just like against Liverpool. And it's not given as a corner, despite it not coming off our forward, I think was Martinelli at the time as well. The decision making in this league, my goodness me, is just terrible every single week. Like I watched the Southampton Wolves game. You know, I know Wolves have been hard done by in general, but my goodness me, Southampton were so poorly treated by the referees in that game. The refereeing is dreadful. And somehow teams like Liverpool are still benefiting from it quite madly. And it's just falling certain ways, and it's just falling the way against Arsenal again. Jeffrey says, I think those red cards in quick succession have been very damning. Yeah, they absolutely have. And again, they're red cards that, have you ever seen? You know, when Rice was sent off, I thought I was never going to see a player sent off for delaying the restart. Lo and behold, an Arsenal player got sent off 2 weeks later. I've never seen any other team get a player sent off for it. I've never seen any other player have a player sent off for delaying the restart. Liverpool's Szoboszlai kicks the ball away despite being on a booking. Is he sent off? No, of course he's not. He's not wearing an Arsenal shirt. It's not how it works. If you wear an Arsenal shirt, that's how it works. I've not seen it happen since, despite there being instances of players being on yellows kicking the ball away. Doku against Arsenal kicks the ball away. Is he booked? No, of course he's not booked. In the same game that sees Trossard sent off for kicking the ball away. It's mad. And it feels like always that it's not just Arsenal against the opposition, but it's Arsenal going up against the officials. And sadly, a narrative has been built, I feel, you know, and that's happened through the referee's decision making in principle, but it's also happened because of our own reaction, because of Arteta's reaction, and because we've reacted to it, because there's been comments made about it. And I think ultimately that's given Arsenal something of a reputation, and subconsciously decisions get made. Decisions get made. Subconsciously and systemically that just for some reason affect us in such a horrible way. Joe says that's the other thing. Slot hasn't had any official decision going against him massively yet, so he hasn't had to criticise the officials, and that must in some way have a sway on their decisions against us. That's a bit of a stretch. I know Liverpool have had some moments that have gone against them that shouldn't, but I mean, all you have to look is the net VAR calls over the last however many seasons. That you can look at Dale Johnson's record for that, and Arsenal are like -4. I think Liverpool are +4, which around those figures approximately. Oki says the Rice sending off and the Martinelli sending off are both unicorns, never seen before or will be seen again. Arsenal are the whipping boys, definitely harder on us because of Mikel's words against referees. Thomas says, been listening on Spotify for months, only just made it over to YouTube. Thanks, Thomas. I really appreciate your kind listenership, and thank you for tuning in and seeing now what a face for radio looks like. Speaking of which, I'm going to be hopping over to TalkSport a little bit later on this afternoon, so I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully can get some more therapy if you need as well. Ajmal says, Tom, what about Havertz getting a yellow yesterday for refusing to leave the pitch when he was bleeding? Was it deserved? Yes. He just needs to leave the pitch. He's bleeding. That's the rules. So I'm not going to complain about the rules as they are in the same way in this sense. Arsenal wearing, if you want to talk about dark arts, I've seen some dark arts in my time. Arsenal employed them to the nth degree when Havertz was off the field. Timber's little, oh no, I dropped the ball and trying to throw it. Been trying to delay time for Havertz to get back onto the field. I mean, it was brilliantly managed by Arsenal. But yes, Havertz needs to just get off the field. He's bleeding. The blood's on his shirt. You can't carry on. You can't carry on like that. So yes, you need to get off the pitch. And eventually it was just a case here. He gave the ref no choice. Clive says Partey and Rice deep as Saliba went wide, so they both covered in dropping in second phase defending. We did not reorganise timely enough. Yeah, it's not positioning it. We've had to be required to be switched on so much for so long in these games. Like the energy has not been there, but focus has dipped in moments, and that cost us yesterday. It cost us a lot. And the goal, it's tough to defend how we defended that goal. When Neto moved inside, there wasn't pressure on the ball. There wasn't pressure on the player, and it proved very, very costly indeed. Timber slides across in the last moments trying to get something on it. But if you're doing that, if you're stretching, what is it? The famous quote from Maldini? If you're having to make a tackle, you've already made a mistake or something. Mikey says, Arteta did nothing with the referees. He merely tried to redress the balance, and the referees destroyed Wenger too. And he had no answer. Ray Beam says, is Caicedo given special dispensation to commit half a dozen yellow card offences without punishment? I thought you saw yesterday the difference between why we signed Rice over Caicedo. Goodness me, Rice is just a much better player than Caicedo, isn't he? Asila says, the pressure is not on City. They've won 4 titles in a row. We're trying to be better than them. It's embarrassing that we gambled our season on the availability of Odegaard. I don't think we did. I don't think we did gamble our season on the availability of Odegaard at all. I think it's just unfortunate. You could argue that City have gambled it on both of Haaland and Rodri's fitness because they had a competent backup to Haaland and Julian Alvarez, didn't replace it. They've needed a response to a Rodri injury for years and haven't had it. Arsenal didn't gamble their season on Odegaard's availability, especially when you consider that the majority, not a majority, but a small portion of fans with warped minds believe that somehow that Odegaard actually holds Arsenal back, believe it or not. Arsenal were in a position where they needed to sell to be able to buy, and they didn't manage to sell until the last moments of the window when, of course, we took out Ramsdale and we took out Eddie Nketiah. And there simply was not an option for Arsenal to go into the market and get at that point. People can argue we shouldn't have loaned Vieira, but if we were honest, Vieira's not been good enough and isn't good enough and won't be good enough. Smith Rowe left earlier in the window and wanted to leave, and the idea was that he was replaced by, in part, Merino, because indeed it was that left 8 position that Smith Rowe was ultimately playing the majority of his games in, because we don't play a system like Fulham do that can now get the best from somebody like Smith Rowe. Amarugan says, Tom Cucurella, man of the match. I thought Odegaard and Caicedo will hurt a player one day, and he's like a headless chicken with his tackles. Cucurella had a very good game. He always does against Arsenal. Usually, him and Saka have really good battles. I feel like Cucurella takes it personally almost when he plays against Saka. Fuad says, who do you think has had the better season so far between Rice and Partey? I think Partey has edged it. Actually, he's more than edged it over the last few games. I think Rice's performances have dipped. So I think Partey has had the better season to this point now. I think Rice had a better start to the season, but I think that Partey has overall taken over that as well. Silla says the title race is over. Again, I don't get these people. Again, if that's your energy, I don't need it. I just don't need it. I don't want to hear it. I'll say it time and time again. If you think the title race is over, and I personally think it's hanging by a thread, I'd say it's fair to say it's all bar over. But to say it's done in November, despite the fact that there's so much more to play and Arsenal can still find themselves in a better position by the end of the year than they were last season, I think it's nuts. You need to raise your standards, people. People need to raise their standards. Arsenal fans being told all the time to raise their standards. Well, you need to raise yours, because that's not good enough. That's not the mentality. You can't ask your players to have a better mentality and then turn around and say the season's over or the title race is over. Alex says, are there any lessons learned looking back at our season so far? Single point of failure in Odegaard, not enough dependable quality and backup, too one-dimensional in tactics. I think I point to the Waneri management personally. I think that we could have done more. I don't think there is any excuses for him not to start against Shakhtar Donetsk to better prepare him for starting in other games. I think we kept Trossard and Havertz in this tandem striker formation far too long, and we were stubbornly sticking with it, for me personally. And I do think that had we have better prepared Waneri with more minutes, than it would have been with, because in every single cameo we've seen of him, every single game he's come on, he's offered something more than I've seen from Trossard over the last few weeks. And so for that reason, I think that's the point of reference I look at the most. I also look at our left-hand side. How can we better emphasize our left flank? Is Zinchenko someone that we have underused? And I know that he's come on in games and not looked particularly great, but I thought the game he had against Preston was the perfect example of what Zinchenko does provide to this team. Have we underused Jorginho during this period? I think we have. I think Jorginho's creativity and progression and directness of passing has been something that we could have done with in some of these games and didn't see. I think there are players in this squad that have sadly been underused during this period, and we've lent on players like Trossard, like Merino, who either, in the case of Merino, in my opinion, not ready. Better yesterday when he came off the bench. Tricky start. Ended the game really well. But Marino is not yet fully ready. He's never going to be for a long time. He missed preseason. He's had an injury. He's always going to be playing catch up. But the reality is, I think that we have misused. It's weird that Jorginho has seen so few minutes. I don't know if there's something going on. I don't know if he's suffering with an issue we don't know about. But Jorginho's underutilization, I think, is a strange one. And I think that the left-hand side in particular has been an area that I thought we kind of looked, we did look to address it in the summer. Calafiori and Marino were brought in to be able to try and emphasize that left-hand side. And I do think that the absence of Calafiori in these last few games has hurt us, because I think that Martinelli was better with him there. I think the left centre midfielder is always going to be better with Calafiori there because it's more natural. A left foot on the left flank. Timber does a really decent job there. A really, really decent job. Yasser says, I don't get the agenda against Marino. There has been a lot of negativity surrounding him without much context. As I pointed out, I think he started slowly, but I think that he ended the second half really strongly yesterday. Some really, competent, progressive passing that was missing for the left-hand side. I think people just kind of want to stick a lightning rod sometimes, and when we're annoyed that we didn't do enough business, naturally that means that you point to a signing that's not going particularly well. So I think that's why Marino gets talked about quite a lot. Sirius is Tom, do you think that Sterling has been managed correctly? I would have liked to see him given a chance on the left flank. I mean, we could have brought him on some games, but frankly, he isn't of the standards. He was a panic signing at the end of the window. When the substitute performance against Shakhtar Donetsk, in my mind, I think made Arteta think, if that's what you're going to come on and do, why on earth would I ever play you? I know he started him against Preston out of more necessity and rotation than anything else. He also started him against Southampton. I thought he was all right against Southampton. But his performance against Shakhtar coming off the bench was a near unforgivable substitute performance when you're only leading the game 1-0. Jogging back, not applying yourself, just letting the game pass you by, not feeling like you need to prove anything. Don't turn up at our club and turn around and say, we're going to see the best from you, and then put in that display. That's not acceptable. And I've defended Sterling quite a lot, and I've said I've talked about him in praising terms in games where I felt like others maybe didn't spot some of the things that he was doing. But that Shakhtar Donetsk substitute cameo was, for me, a turning point in Arteta's mind so early on in the season about Sterling, which has been a big shame. Oki says, Arteta has falling outs with players, and that seems to be the end of their careers at Arsenal. Looks to have happened with Sterling and possibly Jorginho, of course, just speculate. I don't think that's true at all, Oki. The last player he fell out with was what, Aubameyang? And that was what, January 2022? Who's the last player that he had a genuine falling out with? I don't know. After Aubameyang. The idea of it being Sterling or Jorginho is nuts. It's absolutely nuts. There's no evidence of that at all. No evidence whatsoever that he's fallen out of any of them. So trying to put stuff like that is A, dangerous, and B, just completely wild and untrue. Mike says, Tom, there is a second half of the season yet to be played, and yet there is a certain psychology to it. So let's wait and see. Pete says, we need to stop buying Chelsea outcasts. Yeah, because goodness me, Havertz has been dreadful. I always find that point of view crazy, because if you're going to stop signing players because of the club they play for, that's just nuts. That's just silly. Because what, you wouldn't sign Cole Palmer? No, you wouldn't? No? Okay. Plays for Chelsea. Cool. Mikey says certain players will play a role with fresh legs in the second half as well. Paul says Jesus looked disinterested. Yeah, I wasn't happy with Jesus' substitute performance at all. Paul, I agree. I think that's a fair point to raise. And that is part of it. The depth that we thought we had, the depth that we thought that we had in this squad through some of our more experienced figures. And that's why, I know I talk about Waneri a lot. I know I talk about our management of Waneri. I know I talk about the lack of utilization of Waneri. But Sterling and Jesus are however many times Premier League winners. And they're putting in these types of performances when they come off the bench to be given opportunities. It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. You can point the finger at Arteta all you like about Nwaneri, and I do. But Jesus and Sterling have been, Jesus in particular, has been so underwhelming. So incredibly underwhelming. To come off the bench again, like yesterday, Jesus again was near invisible. There was a point on the right hand side where I was screaming at the telly because he's passed the ball backwards and he just walks. He just walks. I think he passes the ball back to Partey and he kind of just trundles around. And you're like, what are you doing? This is elite level football. Pass, move, basic. That is the minimum expectation and requirement of players. Pass, move, pass, move, pass, move. Energy, on your toes. Make a run, make space, move for your teammates, open gaps. And he just walks. And Jesus looks disinterested, really disinterested. And that ultimately is our depth. And, you can talk then about, have we managed the squad in the right way? Have we given these players enough minutes? Have we rotated them enough to keep them interested? Should we have to? I mean, Jesus is on 200 grand a week plus. Should we have to motivate these players with rotation, with minutes? Or should they, when they're called upon, be giving their absolute all? Well, that's a question that only, I guess, Arteta's can answer with his squad, because that substitute performance was not good enough. Again. Ray Beam says, why the hell did we not sign Neto? Would have fit like a glove. Well, I mean, Chelsea wildly overpaid for Neto, of course, and Arsenal didn't have the ability to go out and spend 50 plus million on him at that point of the summer window. So it happened, at early point of August, and Arsenal still needed to offload, and Nketiah still needed to offload Ramsdale to get in that amount of money. I mean, that is his first Premier League goal, it's worth pointing out, of the season. So, and also his injury record is not very good either. I like him, and for the right fee, I might have got him. As I mentioned in the summer, for the right amount of money, I think he would have been a good option. But I don't think I look at his performances this season and go, why on earth did we not sign Neto? Goodness gracious me, what a missed opportunity. I look at Kudus in that way from last season, when obviously West Ham signed him for like 35, 40 million quid. I look at Kudus like that. I don't look at Neto like that. I have not looked at Neto like that at all. Paul says, Waneri always looks ready to start and looks hungry. He can't be far off his first Premier League start, caddy. Well, I would assume not, Paul. I'd assume that he's not far off that, but who knows? Amy says, go listen to Art de Roche regarding management of Waneri. It's so interesting. Makes you open your mind to understand why Arteta hasn't given him more minutes. I've listened to Art's thoughts. I've listened to Clive's thoughts on the management of Waneri, of course. It is eye-opening, and it's very good analysis. But I still personally think that there have been opportunities missed. For me, in my opinion, I think there are opportunities missed with Waneri. You could have started him against Shakhtar. Would have been great experience for him, and against a team that have struggled in Europe, struggled in their own Ukrainian league. I think it would have been great and better prepared to bring him in for these games. I just don't feel like we've built on what we saw in pre-season enough. I just don't feel like we've given the platform there enough, from my perspective at least. Mind, Body and Goal says we are only 4 points down on last season if you look at the results against the equivalent team. So if we get on par with that, we need to get 4 points on West Ham at home and 4 points on Fulham away. It's an interesting point of view, because if we are at the moment 4 points down on the teams that we have played so far this season, and you're right, if we win against West Ham and we win against Fulham, then it is indeed a different kettle of fish. So it is an interesting point to bring up. Manu says, granted, I don't have a PhD in football and tactics like Arteta, but why was Partey pumping balls into Havertz and Saka to knock the ball down and win the second ball, like using a samurai as an axe? I don't like it. I don't like it when we go long. I really don't like it when we go long. I know we've got a big centre forwards and sometimes it works, but we do it a little bit too often for my liking. And the best chances we created in yesterday's game came from the ball being on the floor, and only going in the air and the absolute necessity, like when Odegaard clipped it through to Odegaard. The chance at the end came from a ball being on the floor. Martinelli being created on the left-hand side, missing that opportunity, ball being on the floor. We just need to play like Arsenal again. I just want to see Arsenal back playing the way that we know they can play. And we saw a lot more of that yesterday, more than we have done in the last few weeks. But yeah, for me, that's not the case. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in and listening. I hope this provided some therapy for you. We'll be with you, of course, every single morning throughout this international break, keeping you company, keeping you warm, and full of Arsenal news and latest updates, more discussions, more phone-in shows. I imagine we'll be having one in one of the mornings coming up this week as well. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful, and as always, up the Arsenal.